house. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the whole team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Yeah, when I started, as a kid, playing baseball, and I wanted to do it all the time, sports all the time, my dad gave me a choice. He said, hey, listen, either play and be the best you can and do it every day, etc., or let's go to work. When I was 15 and 16, they asked me to coach a pre-Little League team, and I had little kids in it, and I said, great. I didn't know what I gotten into because there was kids that couldn't catch, throw, they didn't know anything about the game and so forth. And I took it as, when I saw it, I took it as kind of a challenge. I was proud when when a little ground ball was hit back to a pitcher, and he knew what base to throw to, and he did it the proper way. And that really was the beginning when I was like a 15 or 16-year-old. I said, I like this. I went to Ted Williams camp, and I was told by Ted that you'll be a fine coach someday, but you won't be a professional baseball player because you're not good enough. And when he said that, that bothered me for a day. But then after that, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And that's when I went in another direction, although I continued to play. I'm playing Legion baseball for Stoughton High, my hometown, and we're playing Braintree Legion. Mr. Herget, the Braintree athletic director, is there because his son plays for Braintree. And I was the catcher for Stoughton. We get in the last inning, we got to win the game. And I had a good game. Anyway, I got on first in a hit, stole second, stole third, and then I stole home. So I walked, the game's over, and I walked behind the backstop, and he taps me on the shoulder. I didn't know who he was. And he said, I understand you go to Springfield College. Yes, I do, and I play baseball there. And he said, when you graduate, you look me up at Braintree High and I'll have a job for you. Now I'm a 19-year-old, 18-year-old kid behind the backstop, and listen, I couldn't wait to tell my parents and so forth and so on because I didn't know what it meant, but wow. And that's how I ended up in Braintree.
Success can be elusive and intangible. We claim it using feats and facts. We show it and proudly hold it up. We seek it so that success can have its day on our behalf. In his 20 years coaching, the Braintree Womps made the postseason 17 times. And during those years, to qualify for the postseason, teams needed to win 70% of their games. Today, teams only need to win 50% of their games. During the Donnie Ball era, Braintree High School won 77% of their games. And Braintree Legion won 76%. Along the way, the Womps won 10 league championships, 5 Eastern Mass championships, and 3 state titles, including that 1972 rookie coach year. And in Legion, they made the state finals 6 times, winning 3 of them. And they took the 1989 team all the way to the U.S. Nationals in Tennessee. Success, while elusive and intangible, had its day.
The more they won, the more I wanted to cover them. And it sort of became my beat. It was like covering the Red Sox or covering the Bruins or the Celtics.
His records, specifically in baseball, are going to be pretty hard to break and hard to reach.
He lost less than 100 games. You do the math. I'm not a mathematician, but if you figure it out, you're only losing 3-4 games a year, and you're playing an elite schedule. That's pretty darn good.
Coach Fredericks took over a great program from Tom O'Connell at Braintree, but he built it into something even more special, and he deserves credit for that, and all the people around him, I think, will tell you that.
the best baseball league in the state, and all of a sudden they were going to have, quote, a rookie coach, a young guy, because I was the youngest coach in the league at that time, at 27 years of age. And I was going to take over a program that was one of the top in the state. That was the big deal.
That was really historic. First year head coach, 1972. Great team, mixed a lot of seniors and juniors, replacing Tom O'Connell into winning his first year. That's an accomplishment. In the Bay State League, which was a great league.
This was his first year coaching, and they won the whole thing. You know, where do you go from there? And well, later on, he won 2 more state championships, and so that's where you go.
So if you win your very first year as a rookie coach, I mean, gee whiz, you'll never forget that. I see those kids now, and I'm sure they got good memories of that because it only happens once in a lifetime, and they'll tell that story for over and over and over again.
I mean, we were on TV, we were on the radio, we were in the newspapers every day. It was fantastic.
We just kept winning. It was amazing. We just kept winning, winning, and winning.
We open up with 4 consecutive shutouts. We don't make a single error. Win 4 straight games. We go to the Eastern Mass title. We played St. John's Prep. We're beating them 5-0 in the 9th inning. So we collectively go 44 consecutive innings without giving up a run.
The state championship game in 1989, we were at Zott Park in Chicopee playing Westfield, and they were good. They were the Western champions. And we were winning in the 8th inning by a couple of runs, and they had a couple base runners on it. Tommy Malloy was pitching, who was one of our guys. Tommy could do it, and he just got to the end, he was tired. And we almost had everybody rested, you know, so Coach could have brought in whoever he wanted. And their catcher, who ended up getting drafted in the 11th round, was their best player. And he was coming up, and he was a left-handed hitter. And I remember walking out to the mound, and, you know, Tommy Malloy was just out of gas. He just gave us everything he had. He pitched great. And I remember Coach calling down to the bullpen. He called for the lefty. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think we have a lefty.
Coach brought in Tony Costa to pitch out the last two outs, which was interesting because Tony probably pitched 7 or 8 innings all season, if that.
And I remember taking my mask off and looking at Coach and saying, "Are you bringing in Costa?" He says, "I got a hunch, Del, I got a hunch." I said, "Okay." The best player, I mean, he already been drafted. So Costa's warming up, and God love him, he didn't throw very fast, and he wasn't very athletic. But don't you know, he struck the kid out on 4 pitches. 4 pitches he struck the kid out. And I remember after the game, all the parents saying, you know, we won the state championship, so all the parents were waiting for us to take pictures and stuff. And I remember all the parents saying, only Donnie Fredericks would bring in Tony Costa to pitch to that kid. And only Donnie Fredericks would have that kid strike him out.
It was probably 1 or 2 days before we opened up the Legion season. It was right back at it, and we knocked off Weymouth, we knocked off Morissette, and before you know it, we won our district, won our zone, they call it in Legion, and we were 20-0. And if you look back between high school ball and Legion ball, we won our last 9 high school games, our first 20 Legion games. You know, 29 consecutive wins. Probably went 2 months without losing a game.
We played in the regionals, and it was a very difficult regional. Had some excellent teams and some professional people.
And we win the Northeast Regional. We end up in Millington, Tennessee.
We ended up hopping on a plane to Millington, Tennessee.
You never felt such heat in your life.
We have Stalin Dean white uniforms, which are made to be worn probably in the middle of the winter, not in the 104-degree temperature down in Millington, Tennessee.
There was a team there from Puerto Rico who refused their practice time because it was so hot.
Puerto Rico, my goodness gracious. And you got some kid out there throwing 90 miles an hour.
Going down to Tennessee was just an absolutely amazing ride, and one that we'll never forget.
It was his most successful year. His 89 team, we obviously won the high school states, won the Legion states, won the Northeast Regional, went on to the, his first and only trip to the Nationals.
We kind of had it all. We really did.
If we go 2-16, and those 2 wins are against Braintree, we might as well have won the World Series or the state championship.
His coaching was bigger than life. I mean, if you compare his championships, conference championships, to the Yankees at that time, to the Patriots at this time.
People looked at Braintree as the program, almost sort of like, the New York Yankees are looked at nowadays, as the model.
Whenever the pairings would come out, the Division I schools would always say, I don't want to play friggin' Donnie.
We were the top dog around, and people always had the bullseye we had the bullseye on our back. Everybody was shooting for us.
Pete Wall was a very well-known coach at the time, and the two of them would go at it really, really fiercely. And I think he got a lot of satisfaction playing and beating Norwood whenever they could.
We're playing at Norwood. We had 2-on, second and third, and we were losing by 1 run. My best hitter was coming up. I think it was my son, and Johnny pulled the hit ball on me, and that was the 3rd out. I didn't know what the hell was going on for a minute.
Braintree was that team that always came out, and they always had the crisp, clean uniforms. They always came out together as a team. They always had on the matching jackets. They looked more like a professional team, and they always brought a sense of sort of excitement and aura as, you know, here come the Womps. They're playing in Walpole that night, that day. It was just an exciting environment. I remember even in junior high and high school, you could sense that something was different when the Walpole-Braintree game was played.
It wasn't just a team, there was a baseball program in Braintree, and it was instilled in you from an early age at a time when everybody was playing baseball in the 70s.
I mean, he watched over us in junior high, and even prior to that, through Babe Ruth and things along those lines.
So when he came down to whether it was to the Little League field or to the Babe Ruth field, you recognized him right away. You knew exactly that he was there to watch the game, and you wanted to play your best because you looked forward to that opportunity.
He and his staff and all the people in Braintree came down, did clinics with the youth programs, and taught you how to pitch at a very early age. So by the time kids got to high school, they knew how to pitch. They not only knew how to throw off speed pitches, but they knew how to handle counts, how to slide step, how to do things to throw runners off, or slow the game down, or speed the game up. I mean, most high school teams didn't do that. We played baseball as a reflection of what Coach Fredericks was.
And you looked forward to the day that you had the opportunity to play for Coach Fredericks at Braintree High School. It was known, you know, its traditions and its winning had carried on over the years, and you couldn't wait to have that opportunity.
Does he deserve all the credit? No, and he'll be the first to tell you that. He took over a great program, but Braintree High School baseball was not a team. You were playing a program when you took on Braintree High School.
We had to wear the uniform a certain way.
White shoes, white cleats was special because nobody did it except us.
We used to paint them white, and that was just our signature.
At Wellesley, wear white shoes. Phil Elmasian, who went on to be a great coach and a great player in college and this and that, and I thought it was really cool.
Back then, white cleats, if you wore white cleats, it was kind of not a good thing to do. I mean, that was kind of a girl thing. But for Braintree baseball, we all wore white cleats, and it was like, you're proud to have white cleats. We were the only one in the whole league that had white cleats. Now, who wore white cleats? Don wanted us to wear white cleats.
We always looked up to Mr. Fredericks. Even from the 3rd grade on, we always wanted to be like him.
I think, you know, he's an icon. He's a legend.
Good-looking guy, had the swagger, very confident.
He looked an awful lot like Mickey Mantle.
One of the things I remember so much about him is what an unbelievable worker he was. He would be one of these guys that would run around the gym with his sweats on, and he'd put a plastic jacket on that would make him even sweat profusely, and he would just run and run and run.
Back in the early 70s and the mid-70s, there was no pitching machines. Don Fredericks would be pitching batting practice to everybody. Bang, bang, bang. You know, it had to be 1,000 pitches. And it's okay, 2 more, 2 more, 2 more. I don't know how he got the energy to just keep on pitching. And he'd do it the next day and the next day. I tell you, talk about a rubber arm. I mean, Don Fredericks was the pitching machine before there was a pitching machine.
I don't think there's a better baseball person that I've met that knows more about the game than he does.
He was probably the smartest. I mean, I've been around baseball my whole life. Still today, my job is baseball, and he's the smartest baseball guy I ever saw.
He was a fiery guy. That's how I see him on the basketball court nowadays. You know, he's in a little later years, but he's still fiery, still aggressive, but that's made him successful.
To this day, I still call him Mick whenever I see him.
We were great fundamental ball players.
The X's and O's in our preparation.
We had to study the game of baseball. The coach knew baseball inside and out, and we had to study baseball.
They did all the basics, the fundamental things really, really well.
There wasn't one situation that we weren't ready for.
We were like a machine. As a high school baseball team, we played fundamental baseball.
I truly believe we're better prepared than 95% of the teams out there.
The bulletin board in our locker room that had the current standings, who was playing who, current stats, things that we had to execute on any given day. We were prepared.
We never lost close games. We always won the 1 or 2 run games because we would bunt guys over. We would execute first and thirds.
And he got you into that mental approach. It wasn't a physical approach in baseball. You had to be in good shape, but it was a thinking man's game too.
You'd be walking down the hallway and he'd go, hey, first and third, 1 out, base hit to right field, where do you go?
The typical Freddie practice was that he would put a full outfield and infield out there with a pitcher on the mound. He'd be the batter at the plate with his fungo. He'd make the pitcher throw a pitch. He'd say what the count was. He'd put a man on second base or a man on first base, and he would look around and he would wait to see, I swear, this was one example, he would wait to see who was sleeping or who wasn't thinking, and he got you thinking baseball. And he would hit a fungo like there's a double to right, and the guy was on first with less than 2 outs, and he wanted to know, he'd stop us in the middle of it. And if you were in left field, he'd say, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? Where are you backing up? So we did that over and over and over again so many times that we were like a machine.
That's what it was. You knew the game so well that any position, any circumstance, anything we got into a game, we already knew what we were going to do.
Braintree was playing in the state championship, and it was just finished the 8th inning, and they were winning pretty convincingly. And I remember the team coming off the field, jumping up and down, thinking 3 outs away from the state championship. Yet there was Coach Fredericks who pulled the pitcher aside and amidst the chaos of being just 3 outs away from a state championship was working on his mechanics, was trying to show him to stride and follow through a little bit more comfortably. And I remember just sitting there thinking, here's a guy who's 3 outs away from a state championship and the game's pretty easily in hand, yet he's trying to get his pitcher to follow through a little bit better in the next inning, the last inning of the state championship. And to me, that just always stuck with me, like, this is a guy who was coaching from the first pitch to the last pitch.
One particular year, I remember BC High coming to play in the first round of the tournament, and these kids were massive, you know, obviously all hand-picked from different towns. Probably most of them were already 19, as their parents probably redshirted them when they were in kindergarten. And Don's kids were just the Braintree regular kids, but at the end of the game, Braintree won. BC was hanging their heads, and it was because Braintree was better prepared for the moment. And when that moment occurred, again, his kids produced.
We were able to handle better individuals or outstanding players as a team, and that was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Without question, Coach Fredericks had the intimidation factor. Without question, and that was part of the aura of the program.
I know that we definitely intimidated teams as soon as before the game even started. We had teams, they had no idea what they were up against.
We would take infield practice with 8 balls going at once.
And it was flying around and it was sharp and everybody knew exactly what to do with the ball.
It was so intense and it was so unbelievable that people would say, you gotta be kidding me, we already lost this game.
And I would look over at the other team watching us take infield.
We'd stop and we'd watch and we'd look over into the other dugout, and the other team would stop everything they were doing and watch our infield, outfield.
And the game was over before it even started because they were so intimidated.
At the end of infield, outfield, we'd laugh because we'd already feel like we have a 3-0 lead without even the first pitch being thrown because they were so intimidated.
It was an intimidation factor. Not intentionally, but we just did it so well. If you're going to do something, you might as well do it to the best of your ability, and if you're not successful at it, maybe you should find something else or another way of doing it so you can be successful. That's what we're here for, to be successful.
Don Fredericks earned a strong reputation of success, and with that success also came controversy. That penchant for controversy was well known by players, parents, and even journalists. Journalists routinely described him as competitive, boisterous, controversial, excitable, aggressive and fiery, flamboyant, a disciplinarian, vociferous, tough, dynamic. He was known for his dedication, and hard work, his desire and competitiveness. He was always pacing. He's intense. He yells at kids. He yells and browbeats. He's on his feet, clapping, shouting. It's all part of the Fredericks style. His intensity is unbelievable.
He was an intense guy.
He could be a little intimidating.
No question that he's intense.
He could be a little rough.
He was crazy. I mean, he was an animal.
You better buckle in because it was time for you to step it up.
I think the fierceness of his competitiveness was something to behold.
Well, a lot of people would show up to see Don Fredericks as well as the team.
He knew we were hungover. He knew we had been having some fun, and he was just relentless. He would drill those fungos at us all day long. He'd put us in situations and get us to be thinking baseball with a man on second, 2 outs. But he would look to see who was asleep or who was hungover, and he'd hit the ball to them.
It's the first time I introduced Coach Fredericks to my son. I said, this is the guy, the reason why I'm in therapy.
Thank God they started building dugouts on high school fields, and then you couldn't see some of his antics.
I used to get a kick out of him when he would get into a player's face. My God, he'd really let him have it.
He'd be right in your face. He'd just yell and scream at you for 5 minutes.
If he used your full name, you were in trouble.
Paul Bracken, get over here.
And every once in a while you'd feel a little saliva hitting you in the face, and it was just, kind of like a screaming Mimi.
We'd have a permanent indentation in our chest from the finger being buried into our chest as Coach Fredericks would come out to the mound and talk to us and basically telling us to bear down.
I learned real quick to hear what he was saying, not necessarily the volume he was saying it at.
So they had guys on first and third, and I was catching, and it was like the second or third inning, and there was no score, and there was 2 outs. And, he told me to hold the ball, don't throw it to second base. Let the guy go, and, we'll take our chances with the batter because there's 2 outs. Well, the runner got a bad jump. And I thought to myself, I can surely throw this kid out. I've done it 100 times in my lifetime. And I threw the ball into center field. So the kid not only went from second, he went from second to third, and the runner from third base scored. It's 1-0, and we're facing who's probably the best pitcher. Well, he was the best pitcher in the state. So next guy strikes out, and it's funny because where I'm sitting right now in the dugout, the water cooler was right here. And I came down, and Coach always stood at the end of the dugout by the bat rack, and I purposely came way over here. I always would put my stuff in the bat rack. I came way over here, and I was getting a drink of water. And everyone was, kind of down because this kid had struck out like almost everybody he faced in the first few innings. So here comes Coach. I can't see him, but I can feel him walking down to me. And he ran me up, one flag pulled down the other. How many times do I have to tell you to do what you're told? Why do you always think you can do what you can do? I told you to hold the ball. If we lose this game because of... Now he's getting louder and louder. And I don't deal with authority so well, so I'm starting to get a little boisterous myself. And like I said, I'm a sophomore now. I'm over 75 games in catching for him, so, I've been around it. But this one particular incident, I lost my cool. And as he grabbed me by the neck, the shirt, and told me to wake up, instinctively, I don't know how I did it, I took a glass of water, and when he turned around, I threw it on his back. And the whole dugout went, did Dell just throw a glass of water on Coach Fredericks' back? And as soon as the water went out of my hand, it was like slow motion. I could see it just slowly, it hit him on the back of the head and down his jacket. And he turned around and I said, well, that's it. I might as well start taking my equipment off. I'm thinking to myself. And he said to me, he goes, the only reason you're still going to play is because you got balls. That's why you're going to play. So I was literally relieved. So in the 5th inning, we had guys on first and second. I come up and hit a double. Both runs scored for us to win the game. And, I made a point to make sure I put my helmet right next to him on the bat rack. And he told me, go down the other end of the dugout.
I was catching one game, and, there was an incident, pass ball or something, and I come off the field, and he says, Ryan, don't take off the gear, just start running up in front of the bench. And that's all I did. In between the inning, I ran up and down the bench, And he got in my face and he said, don't have another pass ball, you'll be sitting on the bench the rest of the game.
We were on the bench one time, and at the time we used to wear the helmets out in the field, and we had the helmets all in front of us. And I remember my brother Paul, him and Jackie Harrington, he was sitting next to Jackie Harrington, and they were having who can get the most pebbles in the helmet. So I think they were up around maybe 11 or 12, and they're hitting clink and clink and clink. All of a sudden, Mr. Fredericks comes up. He kicks both helmets. He says, were you guys paying attention? We go, we weren't. He goes, you know what? You can get off the bench right now. Empty those helmets up.
You better pay attention.
He was just like focused, and we were like, oh my God, he even watches us on the bench, because you had to be into the game, so I was scared.
You know, I remember I was playing Brockton in a scrimmage on a freezing day, and I was playing third. I just made probably 3 errors as a sophomore, and Dad came out to talk to the pitcher, and the whole time he was talking to the pitcher, I was kicking dirt trying not to pay attention to him, and he didn't talk to the pitcher. He looked at me, and he said something along like, yeah, you better not look at me. Yeah, see, you better catch the ball. You better not look at me. And meanwhile, Mike Lally, who was on third, who I didn't really know at the time, and Mark Pileski, whose dad was the coach at Brockton, I didn't really know all that well, were like, wow, that guy is really hard on you. And I went, yeah, he's even worse at home.
He threw me out of so many practices and made me run the track that I should have lettered in both sports.
I was told to hit the oval, you know, whether I screwed up a first and third situation or I hung my head for a second on the mound, and I was told to hit the oval and start running track.
Didn't matter who you were. You could have been the 20th guy on the bench, or you could have been the best player on the team.
So this big kid was coming up, and he got my attention, and he said, don't throw this kid a curveball. I said, yeah, I know that. You know, we've already discussed it. So they had runners on first and second. And for people that don't understand baseball, when you have runners on second base, you have to give more than one signal. You can't just put down one signal, because the base runner can relay it to the batter, so we have a multiple signal system. And Bobby Needle would always get confused, our pitcher, on multiple signals. So it's 1-1, whatever the count is, and I called for a fastball. Bobby Needle threw a curveball. The kid hit it over the scoreboard in left field for a home run. It was just absolutely annihilated. And now Coach Fredericks is looking at me like seething. So now he's coming out to the mound. So I run out to the mound before Coach gets out there, and I says, Bobby, what are you doing? And he goes, well, what? Not a curveball, it was a fastball. He goes, oh yeah, I forgot the signs. Yeah, oh my God. I said, Bobby, listen, when Coach Fredericks comes out here, shut up, I'll deal with him. Just be quiet. We're still winning, just be quiet. So Coach would have that same strut he would always have. He'd be pumping out, and I knew there was going to be some action. So as soon as he got to the mound, I said, Bobby, be quiet, I'll take care of this. Coach stepped up to the dirt, looked at us, and Bobby Needle goes just like this. Dell called the curveball, Dell called the curveball. And I turned and I looked at him, and I couldn't, it was in the middle of the game. What was I going to say? He's lying? And I remember Coach taking my mask and turning my head, telling me, what did he say? He said, when are you going to listen to me and understand that I'm trying to help you? And I had to sit there and take the abuse when Bobby Needle was the one who made the mistake. And I don't think Coach ever knew that. I never told him that story because we won the game. Bobby Needle heard about it in the locker room, I can assure you that much. But just like that, he said, Dell called the curveball, Dell called the curveball.
If you made an error in a game, the next practice, or whenever during lunch break, he would hit you 100 ground balls. I mean, from side to side, you had to go from side to side, and you didn't stop.
The ground ball, you better be ready, because there's going to be a whole bunch more coming at you, a lot harder than the first ones. And I was kind of glad I was playing short and not first or third, because I wanted a little distance between me and that bat.
And he hit a one skipper that hit me on the left cheek, left eye, and told me to get my head out of my ass.
If he hit a grounder to you and it went by you or you didn't field it correctly, he would have a tendency to take a few steps closer to you and hit it even harder. And if it continued, he'd almost be right up close to hitting ground balls.
Coach Fredericks was running this clinic and showing how we took infield at Braintree. So I was at third base, and he hit this fungo, this one hopper at me that skipped off the grass, hit me right here. And you know that sound of the ball full speed hitting flesh? Boom, like that distinctive sound. So, and we had 8 balls going at once. So the ball hit my face, I went like this, and I went, oh, and immediately I pulled my hand down and there was blood everywhere. So I knew I was hurt. And Coach Fredericks just kept hitting fungos, and finally he goes, time. So he comes out to see me, and he looks at me, and I got my hand over my face, and I pull it over, and I'm looking at his face, and he goes, oh. And I'm like, he goes, put your hand back. So I don't know if my mouth's falling out or whatever. So here's what he does. Here's what he does. I'm thinking he's taking me in, he's gonna put ice on it. He leads me over in front of the kids. He goes, you see that? You see that? And the kids are looking at me and they're ready to throw up. I'm hemorrhaging, there's blood coming out everywhere. And he goes, did you see what he did? As soon as he got hit, he picked the ball up and threw it to first base. And I'm looking at him like, what? What are you talking about?
He didn't ever make me cry. I think he made some kids on other teams cry. I never saw him make anyone cry.
Mr. Fredericks decides to have a practice on a Sunday on graduation day. Okay, there was like 7 seniors in the team. Graduation day, he has a practice. He says, whoever doesn't come to practice is off the team. Okay, so now they're having graduation parties and all kinds of stuff for all the kids. So we all go to practice, and my brother Jay, we had a big party here for Jay for his graduation. So I went to practice. I was only a sophomore, but Jay didn't go to practice. So I get to practice, and he goes, hey, where's your brother? And I go, oh, he's at my parents' party. And he says, well, tell him he's off the team. I go, what do you mean he's off the team? He's graduating, he's at the party, my parents are having this big party for him. Tell him he's off the team. Well, I just freaked. I just got up and I left the field, and I walked from Braintree High School all the way almost to here in bawling and crying because I was so upset because I didn't want him off the team. He was on the team, and I said, how could this guy do this? It's graduation, party. But afterwards, when I got home here, after his practice, he calls us up, and he was so sorry. I'm sorry, Paul, I did that. I shouldn't have done that. He talked to my parents, he talked to Jay. So he said, Jay, you're back on the team. I just wanted you guys to be here so we could practice for the game on Monday. And so I forgave him that time, but I did. I cried all the way home saying, how could a guy like this do that on graduation day to these kids?
Coach and umpires didn't get along too well. He intimidated them severely.
If he had something to say to the umpires, he certainly did.
I think Johnny got thrown out once against us. I forget what it was now, but and I love that when he got thrown out.
It was probably something I wasn't very proud of, but I just reacted and so forth. How I felt 30 minutes later when I'm sitting at the car by myself or this and that, whatever, I don't remember. But if I felt the way I should feel was that, why'd I do that?
Bobby Cusack was playing second base. For us, there was a hard slide at second from the Morissette player. Bobby wasn't able to complete the double play. It was sort of late in the game. It was a close game. Mr. Fredericks came out to argue his point. And it was sort of an interesting conversation here with the umpires, people yelling and screaming at Mr. Fredericks. Consequently, got thrown out of the game. But I think he knew that we were going to win the game, so he didn't actually leave the property, but lit up a big cigar standing in the background as we wound up closing out Morissette to win the game.
Don was playing down at Plymouth in a playoff game, and I had come from work. I'm dressed up in a suit and a tie, and I'm walking into the park in Plymouth, and the parents are yelling to me to get down to the down to the field. Don had been thrown out in the first inning. Now, whoever gets thrown out in the first inning, unbelievable.
There was a rule that happened there on a pitcher and a batter causing a pitcher to balk. And I went out and argued the rule, and I was correct. And the rule eventually had to be changed, okay, in baseball. And the umpires did not know the rule. And they allowed me to argue maybe for 15 minutes, okay, because they knew I was right, but they called this, that, and whatever. Eventually they had to throw me out of the game because they couldn't go on, we couldn't go on forever.
What do we do now? Like, our leader's gone. I mean, he got ejected in the first inning.
So I go down there and I have to sit with the team, and I'm probably the best dressed guy in the world at the time that ever coached baseball. And we ended up winning the game. Well, Don sat in the stands. I think he was kind of directing a little bit from there.
It was a little quiet in the dugout for a couple innings, and then, we sparked a few hits together, and then, our talent kind of took over, and, he came back in the dugout after the game and he looked relieved to me that we won.
And we did win 6-5, And we then came back to Braintree the next night, won that game, and we went on to be state champs, New England champs, and then went to the Nationals. If we had lost that game, it was all gone. See ya.
And then after that, the next game, he was back to being himself, yelling and screaming at the umpires. He never backed off for a second.
Coaches are different today than like when Donnie and I were coaching. We were fiery. We wanted to win, and some of these coaches today could care less, you know, and they just go through the motions, and it pisses me off.
He wasn't the only coach. Every football coach was like that. Pete Wall was like that. John Carroll was like that. All coaches were like that. In your face, loud, things like that. But it's completely changed.
Unfortunately, now in today's society, you know, there's a lot more coddling, and there's not more. Unfortunately, players can't be held accountable, and it's a shame because the game, I think, suffers because of it.
Donnie's style today would probably not go well because, you know, everything has changed. You know, in the old days when we played, if we did something wrong, we were expected to be reprimanded. Nowadays, if a kid does something wrong, it's never the kid's fault.
Coaching has changed because society's changed. You can't coach the way I coached, vociferously, demonstrably. You can't do that anymore because kids don't want to tolerate it, parents don't want to tolerate it, and administration doesn't want to tolerate it.
Back in the day, educators, you know, as teachers and coaches, they were looked up upon in very high esteem, not only by the students, but also by parents. And a lot of times it was, whatever the coach says, you do what the coach says. Nowadays, more so, we look and we find that we have a lot more dinner conversation going on, whereas what happened today at practice? Why aren't you playing today in practice? You know, why aren't you playing in the games? Why aren't you, you know, playing more?
But if I were to coach today, I'd have to adjust my personality. I'd have to adjust what I say, how I say it.
He would not have the patience that you need today to coach young people. He's a great educator. There's no ends. You know, the student athlete to him is the most important thing, but he's very intense. When he gets intense, I can just imagine them all running out of the dugout and heading to their cars. So,
I don't know. Times are changing, and they're not changing for the good, in my opinion.
He expects excellence for whatever ability you have.
And it came across as, you know, that he was yelling and screaming some of the time when he was just pushing forth that he knew what it took to be successful.
It was just his way of getting, as they say, that 100% situation.
And I think he was great for those athletes, student athletes that were kind of, you know, had some talent, but they weren't the real skilled player. And I think that he got the most out of those guys. And he raised my level on the baseball field.
A lot of the guys we played with didn't really know how to take it. And so consequently, maybe didn't have the same kind of success that we did.
You either cut the mustard with him or you didn't. You either were able to put up with it and be able to handle it, or you quit.
It's not about Mike Ryan, it really is about the team, and that's what he did. He taught you about it was about being about the team.
I would always want to show him that I could do something that he would kind of state in his own way that he didn't think I could do. And that was his way of challenging me.
The group that was able to handle his toughness, it brought us together, and he knew what he had in us, and we knew what to expect from him.
As hard as he was always the first one there to shake your hand when you did something well.
He'd just yell and scream at you for 5 minutes, and then he'd tap you on the bum and say, go get him next time.
Then he'd put his arm around you and say, hey, you know, you're doing a great job, or you know, I appreciate the hard work.
And it was great, and that's the way he was.
His bark is worse than his bite. You know, he'll come across as a real tough guy, but I think if you go beneath that exterior, you're gonna find a guy who really cares.
People that saw us coaching against each other, they probably thought we hated each other. But that wasn't the fact at all. We both loved each other, really, you know.
One night there was a foul ball, and Don kept going, keep coming, and Tommy ran into one of the poles in the dugout. And as he picked himself up and Don went to try and help him, he said, "Get your hands off me," Tommy said to Don. And I goes, "Uh-oh," because I was the athletic officer for the Legion. And Don said to him, "What's the matter with you?" And Tommy says, "I can never please you. You know, I give you my best, but I can never please you." And Don turned around and said to him, he says, "You know why?" And Tommy says, "No, why?" He says, "Because I love you, that's why." And he gave him a hug and walked away.
I grew up a little bit, and some might question that, but the fact is that I had it more under control, and any time I got out of control, most of the time it was for show, not because I was out of control. But you have to grow up, and that's a good lesson for any young coach that gets into it, that it's not all about you.
A legacy built on tales of success and a reputation of intensity lingers on in the lives of those affected by this rookie coach.
I just think, you know, when I look back, high school baseball is going to miss coaches like Donnie and myself. I really believe that.
I still have questions about how to handle certain situations. I still go to him today to ask how to handle those situations because I think he will always give me the proper advice.
Much of what I do in my 23 years of coaching now, I take many, many things from him. I've learned so many X's and O's, whether it's first and thirds, whether it's bunt coverages, whether it's mental toughness, whatever it might be, and I try to instill all those things into the players that I have.
He's who I compare every coach to, whether it's coaches that I've played for, after Braintree High School played for, or now that I'm involved in sports, you know, in a different capacity, I compare other coaches to him.
I attribute the vast majority of my success to him.
When I think of what Coach Fredericks did is really to instill in me a work ethic that carries with me today.
He truly does bleed blue. He wants what's best for Braintree.
If people only knew the amount of money that he put into the Braintree field to make it look nice.
He not only wrote letters of recommendation for baseball players, he wrote it for other athletes, other students, and everything else.
Everybody smiles when they see him.
He would hear me on the radio talking baseball, and he would challenge me. And he would say, "I heard you talking baseball. You don't know what you're talking about." And he would challenge me. And if you didn't know him, you'd almost be like, couldn't you be proud for the kid? You taught the kid and he had all this success and he's one of yours. No. But that was the way he did it. But he was proud of me. And he told me years later and the success I had and what I did. But he was not going to give up. He was not going to relent. But he wanted to challenge me even after all of that. And that kind of sums up what Coach Fredericks is all about.
Without his guidance, without his personality, without him watching over me, without him driving me, without him motivating me, I would have found it very hard to achieve the type of things that I had.
But he was an intense coach and a good coach, and I'm thankful for the time he spent with me.
He used to say, "Hey, life is tough. You think I'm tough here? You wait till you get out in the real world. It's going to be real tough." And you know what? He was right. He was really right.
To me, the barometer of a great coach is if they get the most out of their players, and that was the thing about him. He could soak the very last drop of ability out of a kid, and I think that was the best thing. And I hope that's what I can do with my teams.
If you don't love baseball, you're probably not going to like him, and you're going to probably hate him. You're going to probably think he's an a-hole, and he probably is. But he's our a-hole, and we love him.
I remember people always make fun of the fact that he's always, you know, in the shorts and the blue jacket and the hat.
Jackets, the shorts, the high white socks.
Being the athletic officer for the Legion, we bunked together in many of the trips that we took, and I can verify firsthand that yes, he did sleep in that jacket.
The tag on the back waistband, that he didn't cut the little things of thread that hold the tag on. He just ripped it off, and he usually didn't have a belt. So he had the 4 white little marks on the tag, and people used to call that the Fredericks mark on the back of the slacks.
It's just, thank God he was a phys ed teacher,
Because if he was a classroom teacher and he dressed like that, oh my goodness gracious.
I mean, to this day, he still wears sweatpants and stuff. I see him around and he has those dress sweatpants.
The only time we ever saw him without his blue jacket, he came storming into the locker room and he lifted up his jacket and he dropped his shorts and he had a heart monitor on. But I can remember he came in and said, "Look at what you guys did to me." And I can remember, "We didn't make you fat."
He used to, with his girdle, he used to suck in his stomach.
My little 5-minute meetings with Don tend to go to about an hour.
Now he's in the Empire, and he almost threw me out, the son of a bitch.
He had 2 fancy cars.
He'd pick us up in his Ford hatchback car and his Mustang.
I do remember his pretty blue Trans Am. I do remember him, you know, parking down at the loading dock like he owned the place.
But Donnie had diarrhea that game, and he had to go and change. He shit his pants. Oh, and I remember we played him a couple of games later, and I said, "Oh, here comes the hitter."